Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about what is meant by the Son of Man and why the Son of Man must be lifted up. In this show, we will discuss the concept of being born of the Spirit and what it looks like when the divine principle is born in consciousness. Listen as we explain why Mary Baker Eddy wrote, "There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. For God is all in all. Spirit is immortal truth. Matter is mortal error. Spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material. He is spiritual." End of quote. That was from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 468, lines 9 to 15. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and live as the divine self. Swami, today's title of the show is Rising as the Son of Man. Why those particular words in the title?
Yeah, I thought maybe what we could do in this show is clarify the term, the Son of Man, which is a phrase used to represent born of spirit. The birth not of woman, which is flesh. It can also be said this is the first birth. The firstborn is the spirit, and the secondborn is the flesh. And therefore the spirit must be lifted up or realized. But in truth, there's no second birth. The second birth can also be known as the death of spiritual awareness. And the second death is called the death of the mortal flesh. It gets very complex and confusing, but if it was easy, anyone could demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty. As we know, that's not the normal.
I know I myself was a little confused between the terms Son of God and Son of Man. So essentially what you're saying is Son of God and Son of Man are actually meaning the same thing?
Well, at least from my perspective, it is. There may be very subtle differences between the two terms, but I really like to simplify things. Even say, for example, the term the Christ, which can also be referred to as the Messiah. And these are all ways of talking about this invisible, intangible omnipresence. We're trying to understand the absolute, the infinite, in finite and material terms. We're trying to understand spirit with the mortal mind, which is part of the process. As Mary Baker Eddy said in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 349, 26 to 28, and I'll read it. Mortal thought does not at once catch the higher meaning, and can do so only as thought is educated up to spiritual apprehension. End of quote. And for me, a big part of this education is learning a symbolic language. like astrology, mythology, learning how to interpret the parables of religion. That's why her book is called Key to the Scriptures. There's this translation that has to take place when you're trying to understand the absolute in finite terms.
Well, I'd like to get back and ask you some more questions about the Son of Man. You said it's a phrase that's used to represent the birth of spirit. So you're talking about symbolic language. So what does that mean, the birth of spirit?
Yeah, again, it's symbolism. It's a metaphor. Spirit is the only reality. Now, what we're talking about here is the birth of spirit in consciousness. And I think to help us get a better grasp of this, in Herb Fitch's Realization of Oneness, Class 19A, he opens with reading John 9:39. What I'd like to do here maybe is expand on that just a little bit and have you read John 9:39 to 41.
In quotes, and Jesus said, "For judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind." And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words and said unto him, Are we blind also? Jesus said unto them, If ye were blind, ye should have no sin. But now ye say, We see, therefore your sin remaineth. End of the quote.
Now, what we're looking at with the material senses is the sin. We see the mental material concept, and we're blind to the divine creation. The purpose of the Christ is to become blind to the mortal image and reveal the divine truth. We do this by being born of spirit. We are individualized by the world mind. We draw from duality, fear, and limitation. We must be taught how to separate from particles and waves and reconnect to divine truth and wholeness. The invisible omnipresence, or the void in quantum physics. This is a process. That's one of the reasons why I continue to stay with the Kriya Yoga that we teach, because it's a complete holistic health management system. It gives you a lot of the intricate details that are required. That's why it's a path of action, the path of knowledge, it's a path of devotion. Because if you don't have a symbolic language and the intention of it, because we are trying to explain the absolute with a mind that can't bring forth that divine image. That's why these terms, belief, faith, understanding, become very applicable, because it is a process. And the idea of being born of spirit, to do this with any degree of success, because spirit is the only reality. We don't make anything spirit or spiritual. We come out of the false sense that there is something other than the divine self. It becomes a purification process where we let go of all the material moorings. And as the identity sheds the density of mental, material beliefs, concepts, it rises by expanding into its formless, changeless, spiritual self. I am everywhere, always, never in matter or person or a mortal mind.
So when we talk about the second birth, that would be our mortal birth in the flesh. So if we are believing in that, then that is where we are starting to sin, correct?
Yeah, because with this mortal mind, we see what isn't there. And we are blind to what is there. Only the divine creation is here. And the more that you start to understand this, And you have a willingness to challenge what it is that you're going through. And for me, it wasn't really a big stretch to separate from the orthodox religious concepts, theories, and beliefs that really start nowhere and go nowhere. It's one giant contradiction. You have this all-knowing, all-loving, supreme being, creates you and knows what you're going to do before you do it, and then punishes you eternally for doing it, is ungodly. After a while, you challenge that and you say, well, how does God know everything? All of the disease, sickness, suffering, lack, limitations, all of the imperfections that seem to be in this world, and yet we think it's under the government of divine law. Well, it's not. There is no material world. The material world is a thought, it's a belief, it's a phantasm, it's unreal. And once you get your head around that, and Mary Baker Eddy figured that out reading the Bible. Genesis 1, God makes everything, and everything's very good. You get to Genesis 2, and there's this secondary creation. This is the good and evil world of the mental material concept. It's the shadow of the divine creation. It's a mirage, a hypnotic state. It's not real. And so once you challenge these theories and concepts and beliefs we're inundated with, and you have a plan. Well, this idea of being born of spirit. Well, for a lot of people, we think, well, why not just wait till I die, then I'll realize the truth. But in truth, there's no death. So when you are born and you die and you incarnate and you reincarnate, it's all part of the dream. It's not real. You're in what in yoga they call the cycle of death and rebirth, which is where we reside. And it's an ever-ending, never-ending struggle. And if you want the truth, then again, how do I know the truth? You find that you can't just say it. I know the truth. God is all. It has to go deeper. You must rebirth your entire sense of self in spirit. And because we're individualized by the world mind and we have a physical body and a mortal mind, well, you don't just dismiss that. You must master it. And in this process of mastering the mind-body complex, then once you get to that level of consciousness, then you can walk reason through the open door of revelation.
And isn't that what Jesus is saying when he says, I am come into this world? So I am, to me, means the divine self, that they which see not might see. So he's looking for us to see differently. He wants us to see the spiritual, divine aspects of what dwells in us.
Right. And what you start to understand about this is Jesus is the manifestation of the Christ. Jesus is just the appearance, but he is the mouthpiece for the Christ. And one of the things Herb tells us in Realization of Oneness is the glorification of Christ in Jesus is the revelation of the Christ in humanity, the Christ in all of us. This Son of Man, this spiritual selfhood is right here, right now, functioning. But we must be conscious of it. And you can't be conscious of it with the mind you're using to get you through this lifetime. And the scriptural command was repent, which really means think differently.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. Swami, you made a statement before that we must be taught how to separate from the world of form and reconnect to truth and wholeness. Let's talk about that a little bit more. How should we go about to do that?
Yeah, see, psychological, spiritual development doesn't happen instinctually. Instinct only gets us so far. Even, say, for example, a wolf has to be taught how to hunt food. Humans have to be taught how to initiate this growth process. And that was the responsibility of religion. Religion means to relink. Religion was where we learned how to separate from being individualized from the world mind and under the government of fear and limitation, this false sense of existence, and then rejoin with truth and wholeness, to rejoin with spirit. Even in the Old Testament is called the New Covenant. We actually have to do things because the outside world is like a magnet. And when we incarnate with this material form, which is like carbon steel. And if you understand the relationship between a magnet and carbon steel, you understand the attraction. The pull is very strong. And what they did with steel was they created what was called stainless steel. Through a process of purification, they refine steel. And they take this magnetic carbon steel, which is corrosive, and then they turn it into a non-magnetic, non-corrosive particle that is different than the carbon steel it was. Now, the same is true with the human. That's one of the reasons why the concept of the devil can tempt, because there's a magnetic pull. Like attracts like. And when we are dense physically, conceptually, then the pull to the world mind is very strong. Now, when we purify ourselves, when we refine the mind-body complex, then you lose that magnetic attraction. That's why in Kriya Yoga, we enlist things like yama, niyama. Yamas mean control. First, you learn how to control your thought. And then, of course, you refine yourself. The first niyama is purification. And we refine ourselves physically. The relativity of things is very strong. And so the foods that we eat produce cravings and disturbances in this mind-body complex. Now, when you purify yourself of these attractions, then, of course, you create an opportunity for yourself. And especially if your goal is to rejoin with something that is invisible and intangible. And say, for example, if you're craving refined sugar, if you're craving cigarettes or drugs or even a text for that matter, then the pull is very strong to what is visible and tangible. once you start to break these material moorings, you loose the spirit within so that it can now begin to rise. And it appears to rise, but spirit expands beyond these limitations. Everything starts to reverse because we think we are a physical body with a mind and perchance a soul. But the truth is we are spirit functioning through a mind and a body. And so we're not trying to bring infinite spirit into a finite mortal sense of self. We're getting rid of this finite mortal sense of self, and we're enlisting strategies, practices to do it.
So it sounds like to me that you're saying we need to shift from being addicted to, say, sugar, for example, and be addicted to something invisible and intangible like spirit.
Right. Isn't that what the Bible says? Love God. To become addicted to the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence is the idea here. The language of spirit is silence, and the activity of spirit is stillness. And by stopping the input from the material senses, we make the mind aware of the divine creation, divine mind. And then you look at the way we approach our lives today with overstimulation, preoccupation with the pain, pleasure, control dramas of this false sense of existence. And we wonder why we're having problems. And most of us don't even understand the law of karma in conjunction with the divine law. Because the law of karma in the Old Testament is referred to as the wrath of God. Now, God is not punishing man for his behavior. Man's behavior is its own punishment because you are separating yourself from eternal happiness, absolute goodness. And that's what Jesus meant, that you are blind to what is there. We don't see the divine creation, and it's really not until we cultivate ourselves and develop ourselves to the extent where we know the silence and stillness, and we've made the mind aware for the presence of this eternal principle. And then that principle in that silence and stillness reveals itself to you. That's the birth of Christ. When your thought is illuminated by the invisible, intangible, divine truth. But until that moment of revelation, we really start with belief. You start with a belief that there is a divine principle functioning everywhere, always. The idea of belief is that we believe in anything. We believe we're a finite mortal being. We believe in sickness, suffering, disease, lack, limitation. Now, at that level of belief, you're on a level playing field. But if you have belief in truth, when matter and mind come together with the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence, that impregnates the seed of consciousness. And then through consistent practice, skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, skillful use of water, skillful use of food, skillful use of exercise, you start to nurture that seed and it begins to grow. And as it grows, your belief now becomes faith. And your faith is starting to reveal the omnipotence of this divine principle. And it's affecting your experiences. Until we walk reason through the open door of revelation, we do this with belief. We start with a belief in God. We lift up the Son of Man, the divine spirit within, by eliminating everything unlike spirit, purification of the body, purification of the mind, the mental and conceptual levels, in order to release the spirit. Spirit is buoyant and expansive. When set free from the confinement and limitation of matter and mortal mind, which is universal belief in two powers. And as we let go of that false belief in these two powers, good and evil, and we become a faithful witness to the divine idea, the divine law, the perfection of being, then that begins to influence our thoughts and externalizes as the changes that we are starting to see that have divine qualities.
Swami, I see we have something here from Herb Fitch's Realization of Oneness that maybe you could read for us now.
Yeah, this is from class 19A, and I'll read it. And so, if we were to fear leaving our loved ones, it would be because we have not yet reached a place where we have accepted their spiritual reality. And if we have reached the place where we accept this spiritual reality, then we know that our function is to lift them up to awareness of that spiritual reality. For the Son of Man is not only our own individual identity, but it is the individual identity of all those we know. And so our function now is to lift the Son of Man, here where I stand, there where you stand, there where the child is born, there where the old man appears to be dying. Always there is the invisible spiritual selfhood called the Son of Man. And so lifting up the Son of Man is coming out of the blindness. It's coming out of the false sense of sight, which does not see the spiritual Son, but only sees the first or natural birth, the physical man. End of quote.
Swami, so what does it look like when the divine principle is born in consciousness?
Well, for me, the experiences that you start to have must have the divine qualities. The peace, the love, the joy, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, patience, temperance. The idea of being now under this law of absolute harmony, where everything seems to be working out fine for everybody involved. That to me would be what the influence of the divine on the human experience would start to be. And recognizing Jesus didn't come to do a patch-up job on God's handiwork. What we're calling life, this mental material concept about life, isn't there. It's not real. And we're coming out of a belief that it is. And we're developing these spiritual capabilities. We're developing spiritual sense that now enables us to perceive the divine creation, which we are blind of when we are living out from this corporeal sense level of consciousness. So as we rise into this truer state of being, as we move our identity from physical to astral mental to spiritual, with that comes the revelation life is perfect, whole, complete, never needs anything added to it. In fact, there are no needs in spirit.
Well, that ends our show for today. Be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of the pages, when you scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you can press to further your understanding. Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and live as the divine self. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga revelation. Namaste.